The Nova Guest List Podcast
with Kieran McGuinness.
The very best in indie, alternative and homegrown music from the seriously addictive Radio Nova.
That is the brilliant Robert John Ardiff there from his brand new album Once I Was, which was released last week. And listen to the show. I've been playing his stuff for a while. I think he's great. I was playing some of his music last night to my wife and she was like, who is this guy? This is excellent. And it is excellent. The new album Once I Was, his third solo album, it's just got loads of classic sounding songs in it, clever production, it's elegantly crafted. It's a really, really great album. Go and check it out. And we're very, very lucky because fresh from running around fancy dress parties today, Robert is on the line. How you doing, Robert?
How you doing, Kieran? How are you keeping?
Just to stress, you weren't dressed up at all these fancy dress parties. You were bringing your daughter around fancy dress parties.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I was leaving it up to her.
Yeah. So the album is out a week. How does it feel to have it out?
It feels brilliant. Yeah, it was kind of like a 2-year project, but it started back in 2021. I started kind of writing and developing the songs back then. You know, I have a small studio. I don't know if you know Yellow Door Studios in East Wall.
Yeah.
A little studio there. So I was just working on it, you know, putting in the hours, 5 hours every day for about 6 months. And then I had kind of the guts of the songs kind of written and recorded, or demoed, I should really say. And then from there, I went into Black Mountain Studios, which is up in Dundalk, with James Eager. It's brilliant to have it out finally. Yeah, I'm delighted.
Yeah, I was kind of interested with that because it doesn't sound like a solo album to me. It sounds like a band album, if that makes sense, because there's parts of the songs where your personality or whatever, your presence kind of sits back in the songs, which I think is really kind of interesting because often solo albums, not to a fault necessarily, but sometimes it's very much about the personality of the singer, but sometimes this felt like a collective, like you sat in behind the music. Was that a deliberate thing, or did you notice that?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily deliberate. I think, you know, when I sit down to write a song initially, I write it on the guitar and it's me and the guitar singing the song. But then sometimes when you end up producing the music, like I played the majority of the drums on the album, the bass, the piano, I did a lot of the other instrumentation on it. So when I kind of was doing that, it ended up becoming more of a full sounding album, if that makes sense. I should have actually mentioned that I also got a guy called Gareth Quinn Redmond, who is synth player and violin player, and he spiced up a lot of the songs. It's probably the best way of putting it. After I'd recorded the initial batch of songs, I would describe it kind of like a cake. I had the cake of the song written, then I brought it down to these two lads and they put kind of the cherries and the icing on top, which was Gareth and a guy called Neil Murray. So it was great to have those guys involved.
Mm-hmm. So I read in your press release, and I thought it was interesting, it kind of said that the album was directed by chance. How does that come about?
Yeah, so I was actually rooting in my parents' attic about 2.5 years ago looking for something, and I came across an old Spanish guitar that my mother owned or used to play when she was in a folk group in Rialto many, many moons ago. And the guitar itself, like it had all of its strings, but it had a little crack in the neck of it. But I started playing the guitar and all of a sudden all of these kind of songs came out of that moment. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It's like, you know, when you play a different instrument or you play a different guitar, or
yeah, you kind of go back to basics because you're just trying to create a kind of appealing melody or whatever, and then
exactly, yeah. So that's kind of why I say the album was made by chance, because the discovery of that instrument brought me on an adventure, which led to, you know, the completion of the album itself. And then on top of that, I started kind of going back through old recordings that I'd made. So I travelled an awful lot in my 20s. I lived in lots of different countries around Europe. And when I was living abroad, I had this kind of small little 4-track tape machine. You're probably familiar with the little Tascams. And I used to kind of meet people at like parties or singing on the street, and then I'd invite them back to my house and I'd record them. You know, could be an actor reading a piece, or it could be a singer performing, and I just record them in my living room, and they sat on this, you know, this little tape machine for the guts of, I don't know, 10, 15 years, and I amalgamated all of those recordings that I'd made into the album itself, so to kind of create a story as such, as opposed to just having 10 songs and that's it. That's why I called the record Once I Was, because it was kind of very much so a reflective record.
Yeah. So a lot of the found sounds on the album, is that from those that 4-track?
That's exactly it. Yeah. A lot of the found sounds are from that 4-track. So, like on September Road, you probably hear the bells.
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I recorded. That's the bells at Christchurch Cathedral. I recorded them during lockdown. That was recorded onto my phone actually. But the trumpet sounds, they were recorded in a small little village in the east of France called Dole. There was a trumpet player, a friend of mine introduced me to him, and one night we were sitting around drinking wine and he was playing, and I said, "Oh, can I record you?" And he said, "Yeah, no bother." So I set up just a small microphone, and he played into it, and then I kind of took those samples and used them, peppered them throughout that song itself.
Yeah, no, there's loads of personality on the album, it kind of adds to a richness. It really works as a project as a result, The album is Once I Was, and we're chatting to Robert John Ardiff. Can I ask you about the song September Road? Because it just came in and I absolutely loved it. But I guess you've kind of hit the nail on the head of it there a little bit. But I love the personality of it. I love the atmosphere of it, if that makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about the song?
Yeah, so as I said, the kind of found sounds, the bells at the start, that's during lockdown, and the trumpet was a friend of mine in France. And the song itself, I ended up writing that. That was one of the first songs that I wrote on that old kind of beat up Spanish guitar that I found in my parents' attic. And I recorded it, and then I bounced that through that old tape machine again. So you can kind of hear the warbly guitar kind of sound that's going on. So that's kind of how I produced the track. But the song itself, it's kind of like my missus went out one night, and I was sitting at home, and she was kind of late getting back or whatever. And I'm not remotely a jealous person, but I started thinking in my head, oh geez, I wonder what she's doing now. Who's she off with? So anyway, that's kind of what the song is kind of about. It's about where you can invent stories to the point of ridiculousness, and that's really what September Road is about. Are you queuing for a chipper or looking for a fight?
Yeah. No, look, it's a pleasure to listen to. The album is Once I Was by Robert John Ardiff, and there's some gigs coming up in the new year, but they're kind of in February, so we won't go too far into that. But look, it's a pleasure to listen to the album, and congratulations on it, and best of luck with it over the next while.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kieran. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Let's play that song, September Road, by Robert John Ardiff on Radio Nova.
The Nova Guest List Podcast with Kieran McGuinness. The very best in indie, alternative and homegrown music from the seriously addictive Radio Nova.